and the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heavens, the prayer of the heart, the sand and the sea, the rush of the waters, the crash of the heaven, the prayer of the heart. Their darkened world. In their silence, there is lamentation. In their tears, there is loneliness. Lost in their sorrow, may they find the presence of loving friends. Hear them and be with them. For Stuart's love that united us in life, which death cannot sever. For his companionship that we shared along life's path, which continues through the tenderness of mercy and the tenderness of memory. For the gifts of his heart, his mind, that brought us joy and happiness and is now a precious remembrance. For all of these and more, we are thankful. There's no doubt about it that Stuart was quite a character. I appreciate all of you that this could be a super connector, because hundreds, if not thousands of people, can you hear us out there? Yeah, okay. You know, we're here because that guy touched all of our lives. By the way, I'm Rabbi Ike. I'm Jeffrey Eisenstadt, a longtime friend of Stuart's, and he meant a tremendous amount to all of us. During COVID, this is the largest crowd that I've been with, and I thank you for being so sensitive about each other and wearing masks too. We're gonna do a lot of things because Stuart was quite an eclectic guy. We'll hear some Hebrew. We even have some Latin, some music, some English, a couple of things that really touch our hearts, and we'll have some wonderful friends to be able to speak about Stuart. So I'm going to ask John to begin. We'll be doing music and speakers and readings in between. So sit back, kind of let the memory of Stuart sweep over you as we do our service today.
Ave Maria, gratia plena, Maria, gratia plena, Maria, gratia plena. Ave, Ave Dominus, Dominus tecum, benedicta tu in mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Jesus. Ave Maria.
John Wetzel, one of Stuart's oldest friends, will be coming up here. And as John comes up, if you would, I don't know if you knew this, but Stuart taught Sunday school for me. Yeah, I know, it doesn't seem to be the right person to be teaching Sunday school. His Hebrew wasn't so good, but if you can, join with me in Psalm 23. Lord, my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green paths. I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil. My cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
I don't know if you might know that Rabbi Ike's claim to fame, but Stu used to tell me the story about how they were going through Texas and saw a sign that said, if you can eat this 64-ounce steak, free. 72, okay, excuse me, 72. Well, anyway, Ike did that. Well, having read Stu's obituary, I think it's going to be very difficult to top that. But I was thinking about how do you cram 49 years of friendship into 4 or 6 minutes? So I think starting at the beginning is perhaps the right thing to do, because many of you don't know the beginning. I first met Stu in September of 1972. We were standing in line waiting to register for law school. He was ahead of me, and we started talking and listening around to those around us talking as well, and what arrangements they had for living, and whether or not they had an apartment. Well, we found out that neither of us thought that far in advance, and I asked Stu if he had any idea where he was going to live. He didn't, and neither did I. So I asked him, I said, do you want a room together? He replied, I'm older, not just out of college, and I'm serious about studying. I responded that I'd spent 3 years in the Army before I even went to college, and I was serious about studying too. I can't believe we lied to each other at first of all. So we set out to find an apartment. After getting leads from other students, we found a 2-bedroom apartment in Clifton Park Manor for $110 a month, and that included indoor plumbing. We had no furniture to put in the apartment, and I didn't have a car, but Stu had an old white VW Beetle, so I knew I had a ride to school, and I didn't have to worry about that until I got into the passenger seat and looked down at my feet because I didn't see them hitting the floor. The floor of his passenger side was rusted out, and you had to put your feet on the downslope of the firewall. So then Stu told me that his uncles had a furniture store in Kensington, and we could get furniture there. We drove up from Wilmington and got to the store. The uncles greeted him as a loving nephew, told them our predicament, apartment and no furniture, and they took us to what I would call the scratch and dent area. But I think scratch and dent was a level above what they took us to, and I think was probably repossessed. Stu picked out a bright orange chair and had no cushions, but he liked it, and his uncles gave us a foam piece so that you could at least sit on the chair, to which we added a towel. He also got a couch that was very much worn, and a bed and a dresser. I borrowed a friend's 1956 pickup truck and drove the furniture down after a stop at my parents' house to get a bed and a dresser. The orange chair, he didn't like sitting in that too much, so he said he had a fraternity brother from Penn State who had a furniture store on Arch Street. So we went up there, and he fell in love with what I would call a Soviet Scandinavian lounge chair, stainless steel and leather, and he agreed to sell it to Stu for $50. So Stu reached into his wallet and pulled out a $35 bill. It looked real to me, but I had worked in a bank and during my career and knew that there was no such thing. When he pulled it out, we all laughed, and his friend wrote up a ticket, and he said, take this up to the cashier and tell her you want to put $20 down and see what she does. So Stu takes it up, gives her the slip and a $35 bill, and she gives him $15 change. So we had 2 weekend roommates, and I was going home on most Fridays to see my now wife, wounded in Vietnam, and from Stone Harbor, and a guy we met during registration named Jim O'Connell, or as he claimed, he was the Commodore of the Fishtown Yacht Club. He used an alias of Skip Scooter Jimmy John D'Artagnan O'Connell. They were supposed to bring a case of beer, and by the way, there is no Fishtown Yacht Club. And when we were in need of a meal and a couple of beers, Stu took me to meet a fraternity brother of his, Dave Lipson, or better known as Dr. Dirt, and his wife, Miss Emma, and they would stake us to a good meal and a couple of beers. We did study, though, usually every night at the University of Delaware's library until it closed at midnight. Then we went, when we had money, to the Deer Park Tavern across the street from the library, and that was open until 1 o'clock. As the first semester rolled on, we found the University of Delaware was starting a rugby team, and we decided to go out and help with that. Stu had previously played for the White Marsh Rugby Club, and I had played for Blackthorn. So it was a good diversion from our studies. In fact, when my now wife, but then girlfriend, came down for the first game, she was taken aback at the filthy state of our apartment. You see, we used to place dishes in the sink and didn't do dishes until something green started growing out of the pot. Donna, my wife, also known as Baby to Stu, insisted that we go to the game, and she cleaned the apartment. Stu fell in love with her, and she with him. He called her Baby, and he was the only person allowed to do that. In fact, last Thursday, when we called Stu, he garnered up enough strength and called her Baby, and it brought tears to our eyes. Since Stu and I didn't have trust funds like some of our classmates, he got a job at Pete's Bar, a block from the school, where he tended bar at night, not only to check, but also to give the owner some time with his wife and young children. Stu was a draw for the bar. Pete Andrianopoulos received a well-earned income boost because of him. I remember one night, one of our professors was in there, and he had too much to drink. And when the bar closed, Stu carried him out over his shoulder, just like the picture you see from Boys Town. And Stu said, and I quote, "He's not happy, he's my professor." I got married after my first year in law school, and Stu and our other weekend roommates rented a place called the A-Frame, and I stayed there during exams trying to review all the law we learned that semester. After graduation, we stayed in touch, seeing each other occasionally, but always speaking on the phone regularly. But when we did see one another, it was like yesterday that we were together, and we always felt that love and friendship gained in law school. Donna and I visited Stu in late October, and things looked optimistic about his treatment, and we went to lunch. It amazed us that in the hour and a half we were in the restaurant, how many people of all ages came up to Stu, wanted to know how he was doing. You could see in their face that they really cared about him. And I believe that was because they knew he cared about them. But to hear Stu talk, it was all about his family. Kitty, Jenna, Jessica, Luke, Kat, and Chloe. He talked about all of you all the time and how much joy you brought to him. He was also very proud of his grandchildren and how he loved to go to their games. His love for you and the love you gave meant everything to him. Since we're in the Christmas season, and I know Stu celebrated Christmas, one of the great movies I think of all time is It's a Wonderful Life with Jimmy Stewart. No matter how many times I see it, I always cry at the end. Just ask my wife. There's a great parallel to that movie. You see, Stu and the hero of that film are cut from the same cloth. Stu had empathy, which I believe always had, but he nourished it when he worked as a social worker before starting law school. I always said Stu was George Bailey. In fact, last Friday night, my wife and I were at dinner in Philadelphia, and we talked to another couple about our weekend plans. We told them we were going to Long Beach Island to see Stu. I explained to them Stu was my roommate in law school, and he was the George Bailey of Long Beach Island. When my wife texted our friends of his death on Saturday, they responded, and I quote, "Just heard about Stu. I cannot adequately express how sad I am for both of you." Losing long-time old friends is so hard. Without knowing it, you eulogized him last night when you said he was George Bailey, the epitome of a good man. George Bailey was the main character in The Wonderful Life, and the theme that if you have friends, you're not poor. And Stu had many, many friends. So to paraphrase George Bailey's younger brother and on Long Beach Island, my 3 years in law school with Stu was a great ride with a great person, and I'm sorry that ride has come to an end. Rest in peace, Stu.
Niece Kelly.
Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wretch like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear, and grace my fears relieved. How precious did that grace appear the hour I first believed. Yes, when this flesh and heart shall fail, and mortal life shall cease, I shall possess within the life of joy and peace. When we've been there 10,000 years, bright shining as the sun, we've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saved a wench like me. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see.
Jim Den-Ul. In the rising of the sun, remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember him. In the opening of buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. In the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember him. So long as we live, he too shall live, for he is now a part of us as we remember him.
I moved down to LBI in 1984 and started working for a law firm in Ship Bottom, Shackleton. Hazel had tons of friends. As you can see here, stating the obvious. I once told him that he had more friends than anyone I knew. That made him the richest man I knew. That the number of friends was a true measure of a person's wealth. Stu was always there for his friends, everyone else that needed his help. Stu was never about Stu. Stu was always about you, your family, your job, your health. And it wasn't small talk. Stu was genuine, generous, and selfless. He was not judgmental. He never had a bad word to say about anyone. Stu saw only the good in people. This world could never have enough Stu Snyders.
Stuart had many nicknames. 55 years ago, many of us called him Schniper or Pell. All right, so Pell, I'm going to go with this because I know a lot of fraternity brothers are watching right now, and this reading is for him. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, an excursion, a going, a growing from stage to stage. From childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength and strength to weakness, and often back again, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion and grief, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not in some high, lofty place along the way, but in having made the journey, the excursion, stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning and death a destination, but life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage, made stage by stage, from birth to death, to life everlasting. F.
Thank you all for being here. We're here to celebrate the wonderful life of our best friend. He was everybody's best friend, Stuart Snyder. I'm Robert Aftanis, better known as Af, and I'm a neighbor and close friend of Stu and his family. Before I go on, I'd like everyone to stand up who has been touched or knew Stu Snyder. Okay, says it all. I guess I ought to leave right now. That sums up the whole reason we're here. Stu belonged to a close-knit family, and it was very moving to see their dedication for their love of Stu. The family was comprised of a lot of different families. Of course, the Snyders, the Del Ducas, which I think there's like 1,000 of those. Every time in the summer we go there, there's a different one I couldn't recognize. Anyway, the Harts and the Derions. Stu, the last several days showed the dedication and love for Stu. And Kitty, words cannot ever express your bravery, your dedication, your love towards Stu, not only at the end, but all through your life with him. You are his treasure. I know I'm going to miss people, but I'd like to acknowledge some of those who participated in his vigil those last days. His faithful, ever faithful brother Rob, his beautiful hearted sister Bev, big kitty Nani. The last night, I walked into his room and Nani was holding his hand to almost to the very end. Luke, who acted as his tough drill sergeant in those summer marches where Stu said to us, all of us, please, Luke, lose my number. The 5 kids and their spouses, who he was so proud of, and he bragged about all the time. Jess and Barry, Jenna and Steve, Chloe the Cloister, he used to say, and Gavin and Catherine, who he lovingly called Catmandu. And I think he's going to miss the fact that Catherine is due pretty soon. So that's another tragedy. His niece, Kate Del Duca, was a fixture of courage and calm as she provided her expertise in nursing towards Stu that night. Kim Craig, you were so great the last night, as you knew better than anyone that the end was near. You held him and you created a calming and dignified final setting. You were indispensable in his last hour. Fortunately, I can get into some lighter things now. Fortunately, we have a lot of pretty funny memories with Stu to keep us laughing for years. I have a few, and I know that Rob's got many, and Luke has several, as you know, as you can imagine. Stu would pretty much go anywhere if he knew there was a good delicatessen or it happened to be near White House hoagies. In one such instance, he was heading to Atlantic City, the Atlantic Skip Tool. So apparently Skip comes up in his truck and Stu comes flying out the door. And apparently Kitty had what I would call a strong argument with Stu before that. And she was pissed. And she said, Stu, don't you ever come home tonight. Stu gets into the truck, rolls the window down and says, if I do, what's for dinner? Food. Obviously, you all know Stu loved food, but he was really upset during the pandemic. Not the fact that zillions of people are dying. They the food the food giveaways at Costco. Couldn't do that anymore. But right at home, we held regular meetings at the Sibley Bar on Berkeley Avenue. We called by our good friend, Dr. Emmett Sibley. We enjoyed our favorite refreshments, be it Friday nights, lunch breaks, weekends, holidays, and every other excuse to imbibe in between. Well, we all knew Stu as the kind and generous man he was. When it was just us at the Sibley Bar, different guy, because as soon as I walked in, I would say it's 85 degrees in the middle of summer, and it's a Friday night. He's got a suit on, the tie's all over, and it used to piss me off. And I'd say, Stu, you got to take that off. You're making me warm. So we would have a lot of friendly discussions and arguments. And Emmett was the referee, of course, because he's the nicest guy in the world, pretty much. And he would say something, off color to me, and I would say to him, "You're fat," and tell him he needed to lose weight, as he munched on all the bar food. We laughed, and laughed at the Sibley Bar. Really, Stu and I were closer than brothers. The rest of what was said at that Sibley Bar is pretty. One of our favorite, Stu and I's favorite activities when our wives were out of town together was to go clubbing on the island. Of the winter, we didn't pick a good time. One winter evening, Kitty and Mag, my wife, were over on the mainland to dinner. So we decided, as the swingers we were, we would meet at Buckaloo's and develop a game plan to go clubbing. So we went to Tucker's, closed. Went to the Whale, closed. Went to the Tourist, closed. So we figured we'll give it one more shot. So we went up to Daddy-O's, sort of a wild card for us. They were open. But when we got there, we didn't know anybody, and it took about 15 minutes for the nitwit bartender to serve us a drink. We said, we're out of here. And we ended up going back to Bucks. And we figured we traveled way too far north to do this. And we didn't have passports. So talking about his judicial activities, at court in Long Beach Island, Stu was literally waived from going through the metal detector. He had been through so many times that every time he went in, he's doing this, and he's got this, and there must have been a deep hole in his pockets because it was never ending. And finally the guy, the security guys would just let him go through and empty his pockets on the other side. Once during a trial in Ship Bottom, Stu split his pants at the seams. Now, we kind of are familiar with this pants deal. He does have a tendency to lose them sometimes. But he continued on and he's lucky he didn't get charged with indecent exposure. Everybody, all the people in the court were looking at him. They knew it, but he was going to continue on. He used to say, this is Stu, all his clients were good people, just had some bad moments. He was a Monty Hall, and he was always making a deal to mitigate their offenses. Stu's car was an extension of his office, stacked with files. If you've ever been there, I'm sure a lot of you have, stacked with files every inch. If you happen to go into the office or stop by the house to talk about your case, he and only he could put a finger on exactly which file he needed to review things, find it right away. The car itself, no heat, no air, no shocks, probably 30 years old, and he wouldn't part with it. It's still sitting on the side of his office. And if anyone is desperate for wheels, Kitty promises she'll pay you to take it. Did you ever notice with Stu when he answered the phone, are you okay? How's your health? Your well-being? How's your family? How's your kids? He knew the names of the kids. He knew the guy's memory was incredible. And the irony was he thought of everyone but himself until the very end. So finishing up here, this is the hard part. Stu and I used to joke a lot about everything, but there was one thing we were sort of semi-serious about, and it was, what's on the other side? Well, we tell each other, whoever goes first, try to communicate. There was a quiet time the night of his passing, and I was able to go into the room, close the door, and it was just him and me. I said as loud and clear, hoping it would get through to him, Stu, you need to do me a favor. Please let me know what it's like over there. Stu always returned his calls. My heart is broken with Stu's passing. as you know yours is as well. Although Stu is in heaven now, I'm certain his legacy on earth will last forever in our hearts. I know Stu is with God, and he's free of his earthly pain and in place of peaceful freedom and rest. Stu, you're in my heart forever. I love you.
John.
There are places I remember all my life, but some have changed, some forever, not for better. Some have gone, and some remain. All these places have their moment. Of lovers and friends I still can recall. Some are dead and some are living. In my life I love them all. But of all these friends and lovers, there is no one compares with you. And these memories lose their meaning when I think of love as something new. Though I know I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before. No, I'll often stop and think about them. In my life, I love you more. But of all these friends and lovers, there is no one compares. And these memories lose their meaning when I think of love as something new. Though I know I'll never lose affection for people and things that went before. I know I'll often stop and think about them. In my life, I love you more. In my life, I love you more.
John. Thanks. Brother Rob.
It's a lot of people out here. Thank you all for coming. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rob, Stu's brother. I know this is a sad day. Long Beach Island lost a legend, an icon. Everybody loved my brother. I'm standing here today to hopefully put a little smile on everyone's face with a few stories and memories about my brother that some of you have heard and others you may be surprised of. I broke down some of my favorite memories of Stuart in categories. Stuart and I were very close. We spoke every day, and I mean every day. Sometimes it was 2 or 3 times a day. Nothing really important, just BS and a lot of, what else, Rob? Let me give you an example of a Stu and Rob daily conversation. The phone rings. I look at the caller ID and I see it's Stuart. I say, "Hi, Stu. What's up, Rob?" "Nothing much." "With you, Stu?" "Not much." "How's your day, Stu?" "Shitty, Rob." It just doesn't stop. "That's nice, Stu. What are you doing, Rob?" "I'm driving home from the office." "Having dinner tonight, Rob?" "Yes." "What's Lauren cooking?" "Stu, you know she can't cook." "So what else, Rob?" "Nothing, Stu." "What else with you?" "Nothing, Rob." "Are you having a ShopRite chicken tonight, Rob?" "Maybe." "You gonna put ketchup on it?" "Maybe, Stu." "So what else, Rob?" And this would go on and on and on. We really didn't talk much, just listened to each other, and many times it was both of us just complaining about everything. Then our sister Beverly told me that after he would call me, he would call her and ask the same questions. What else? All of this would be while he was driving home. Stuart's cars, as Af would tell you about. But I have special things about Stuart's cars. As you all know, Stuart was famous for all the stellar cars that he owned. From the Volkswagen that had broken windshield wipers that the only way to make them work was with the string he tied and fed it through the sunroof so he could pull the string if it rained. Or the car that to get it started, you had to bang on the starter with the hammer. Or let's talk about his famous Lincoln Continental, the gold Lincoln, that the rear shocks were so bad that the bumper would hit the ground and cause sparks. You could hear this car coming a mile away. I can't believe that it never caught on fire. Then he had a car where his mechanic told him he was going to one day sit in the car and the whole bottom was going to fall out, almost like the Flintstones. I would always tell him, "Stu, you need a better car." And his line was, "What's wrong with the one I have?" Several years ago, Stu and I flew back from Florida and landed in Atlantic City. It was 6 degrees out with freezing rain, and they just had a blizzard. Stuart left his car on the rooftop deck, and I swore that I could see his car from the plane as we were approaching with like 2 feet of snow on it. And it's 4 a.m. in the morning. Stu looked in the car, and of course, he didn't have an ice scraper. I asked him, "Stu, how are we going to get all the ice and snow off the car?" Next thing I know, he's bringing out his client's charts. Papers are flying all over the place, and we're using them to clear the snow. When we finally got in the car, he then told me he had another little problem with the heater, i.e., it didn't work. He attempted to start the car and it wouldn't turn over. He then informed me that I may have to bounce my weight up and down on the trunk, which he told me would definitely get it started. We get to the toll booth, and of course, he had to find a ticket and all the garbage that was in the car. We pay the ticket, and as we start, I tell him to close the window. It's freezing. He then informed me about another little nugget of information, that the window had trouble closing. And we have to bang our fist on the inside of the door to get it to go up. We're driving, and I'm banging on the door, and it actually went up. 5 minutes later, the window goes down by itself. And that friggin' seatbelt dinger never goes off, even when you have the seatbelt on. Seriously, you can't make this crap up. So we drove home with the window open, and that seatbelt dinging and dinging and dinging the entire home. That was Stuart's cars. My next favorite category, I'm sure you all know, is Stuart's desk. Walking into Stu's office and seeing his desk was always somewhat of a shock. In fact, you couldn't even see Stu because the paper were blocking him. We used to call it the Twin Towers in those days. But my brother knew exactly where everything was. He used to drive our dad crazy. My father would walk into Stu's office and he would have his feet up on the desk with holes in his shoes and socks where you could actually see his bare feet. Richard would ask him for something he was doing for him, and Stuart would look around at the 150 piles of paper on his desk and immediately, like a magician, pulled it out. And he would go, ta-da! Because of his lack of, or I just made a call and I'm waiting for the title company to call me back. And most of the time we know he never made the call. Or how about, I have it right here in front of me. We all heard that. For many years on Stuart's birthday, my wife Lauren's gift to him was to help him organize his desk. She would make him sit at the desk and she would take each pile and go over each piece of paper one by one. She would start first with the 10 ashtrays and emptied them first and collected all the 100 matchbooks and threw them out. Then came the dozens of pens and paper clips and tried to organize them. She found so many Post-its that weren't even attached to a file, and most of them said urgent. Or George would write, this guy called you 5 times and you have to call him back today. And they were all dated like over a year ago. And Lauren would ask him, do you want to call this guy back? And Sue said, nah, he's probably dead. She would find old calendars, old dry cleaning tickets, expired lottery tickets, bills that needed to be paid, lots of IRS notices, and medical insurance bills, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Many times she would say, Stuart, is this $400 check important to you? Or is this car insurance bill that says it was canceled important? Stu's line was, I was looking for that. It took a whole weekend, and she did this for many years. She was so proud of her accomplishment, and a week later, it looked like she was never there. The next is my favorite story. I call it the will. My father, Richard, passed away 9 years ago, and he was living in Florida. Immediately after he passed, we went to his safety deposit box and unloaded whatever was in it. I asked Stuart, should we hire a real lawyer in Florida to handle this estate? And Sue said, don't be ridiculous. I'll take care of it on Monday. I handed him my father's will, and as an aside, I wish I took a picture of me doing that. I told him, whatever you do, guard this and do whatever lawyers have to do. I know all of you can guess what my next line is. Yes, Stuart lost my father's original will. He swore that he gave it back to me. I told him, clean out your car, look in your desk, look in your office. He told me he did that 10 times and it's not there and I must have it. So after 5 years of looking, my father, poor guy, was still not declared legally dead. So we ultimately had to hire a Florida lawyer who said, this is easy peasy. Just give me his will. And I went, duh. In fact, we called the lawyer in Florida who wrote my dad's will, thinking he would have a copy, and he was dead too. So we paid thousands of dollars to have someone in Tallahassee research all my father's documents so we could appear before a judge and finally settle his estate. And what's worse with that, we had to pay an accountant to do 5 years of tax returns when the guy wasn't even alive because his estate wasn't even settled. Fast forward, 3 years after that, I'm sitting in Stuart's office, just hanging out, watching him eat baked beans and a corned beef sandwich from Okies. And he was typing. And of course, he had it on his shirt and had it on his tie. By the way, you could always tell what my brother ate for lunch. You looked at his tie. And he looks up to me, and out of nowhere, he says, I found the will. Out of nowhere. I said, where? In the wheel well, the spare tire in my trunk. Had a flat tire, and I sort of looked, and it was there. He then proceeds to show me this moldy, mildew, shredded document. And the only reason why he came clean is because his legal assistant, George, was going to rat him out. That document sat in his trunk for 8 years. Amazing. Camp. You wouldn't know by looking at my brother, but I bet you didn't know Stuart was an amazing equestrian. He could ride a horse. We went to overnight camp in the early 60s. Stuart, at the age of 16, got a job as a stable boy. He was amazing on a horse. He did have a 34-inch waist then. I always remember sitting in the mess hall, and suddenly there would be an abundant amount of flies around me and the stench of manure. Stuart was coming to eat with me. And he always said, socializing and making new friends. I told this story 2 nights ago, but I was friends with anyone wherever he was. I was on a flight with Stu coming home from Florida. The weather was terrible. The turbulence was unreal. The flight attendants would not even serve anything because of the weather. I left my fingertips embedded in the armrest praying the whole time. Everyone on the plane looked terrified. I was terrified. And in fact, when I looked over at the flight attendant, she was constantly crossing herself. This is not something that gives a pastor a lot of confidence. I looked back a few hours, and there was Stuart laughing it up with some stranger next to him like nothing was going on. I was waiting for the flight attendants to say, lean forward, put your head down, and kiss your ass goodbye, because this plane's going down. Stu was moving his hands up and down, explaining who knows what to this guy. We get off the plane, he said, Rob, why don't you meet my new friend, Bill? Everyone in that plane was terrified and thought this plane was going to crash. And of course, my brother finds a new friend. In his early years, Stuart was a little devil. On New Year's Eve, our parents went out and Stuart was the babysitter. He was not quite 16 years old yet. We had a bad snowstorm that night before, and we had a ton of snow. Out of nowhere, he said he was going to take out my mom's car for a spin. He made Beverly and me promise we wouldn't tell our parents. He did take the car out and got stuck in the snowdrift, and he had to walk to a neighbor's house to help him get out. When our parents called and said they were coming home, Beverly rats him out and yells out, Stuart took the car out, Stuart took the car out, and got stuck in the snow, and is not home, and we're all alone, and we're scared. Or when Stuart and his friends were driving, got stopped, and the cop found a couple of bottles of beer in the car and took him to the station and put him and his friend in a holding cell. My parents had to go down, and my mother was crying, seeing him behind bars. My father's yelling, keep him there, keep him there. Or the time Stu and one of his friends really wanted to know, what happens if you pull that red string on a train? Does it really stop? It stops. So you see, he was a little troublemaker in his early years. I think after that, Valley Forge Military Academy was looking pretty good. Now the hard part. Stuart was the most generous, kind, generous person you could ever meet. He never had a bad word to say about anyone. He was always there to help anyone who needed him. He knew everyone and could start up a conversation with everyone he met. He was so connected. My Uncle Arnold once told me that Stuart had to drive up north to help him with a traffic ticket. And when they got to court, Arnold said, your brother knew everyone in court and even knew some of the prisoners they had in court that day. He loved his family. His kids and grandchildren are, of course, Kitty, his kitten, as he called her. Before he got sick, I'm in his office, and they had to show me a calendar with pictures of his family on it and all the important dates, like the birthdays of all the kids. His face lit up when he was showing me this. His grandchildren meant everything to him. He had a heart of gold. I once told one of Stuart's colleagues that Stu would make a great judge, and he said, the jails would be empty. As a lawyer, Stuart would probably say, Your Honor, my client only shot 3 people, but let 4 people go. And he has a family, and he supports his 100-year-old grandmother and works at the soup kitchen on the weekends, and I really feel he deserves a break. Stu was on the Southern Regional School Board at the same time my daughter Mackenzie was president of the school and served on the board with him. And he was so proud of her, but I think really she was proud of him because he was a wonderful mentor to her. Stu, I wish we could all be like you, compassionate and caring, always putting others before yourself. You were like the guardian angel for so many people who needed help. You didn't care who a person was, you just wanted to help them because they were in need. Several of them had financial problems, so he wouldn't charge, but occasionally they would offer their services to him. One such individual showed up at my house to fix the leak in my roof. He told me Stuart sent him. He was so friggin' drunk, he couldn't figure out how to climb. I asked Lauren the typical question, are we insured for a drunk roofer? She said, are you nuts? I told this guy to go home because I figured when he fell off my roof, that was going to be more of a problem than the small leak I had. So I called Stuart and said he did a good job and everything was okay. He was known for always saying, "Don't worry, I'll take care of it." He loved his family and tried to do the best for them, being a great brother, dad, husband, and grandfather. Always finding the good in everyone, that even though some were bad people, but my brother somehow saw through that. When you had Stu as a friend, you had a friend for life. Every day, patients of mine tell me how they know Stuart and how he got their kids out of a jam or did something to help them. Stu, I'm heartbroken by not being able to talk to you every day. As a friend told me, said, your brother was truly a gift to the community and will be sadly missed. You were the best brother anyone could ever have asked for. Kitty told me every time we talked on the phone after hanging up, Stuart always said, "I love my brother." And I hope you know I felt the same love for you. So, big brother, I need you to know the one thing I'm going to miss every day until we meet again are those 3 words. What else, Rob? I love you, Stu.
And Harvest Moon.
Come a little bit closer, hear what I have to say. Just like children sleeping, we could dream this night away. But there's a full moon rising, let's go dancing in the night. We know where the music's playing, let's go out and feel the night. 'Cause I'm still in love with you, I wanna see you dance again. 'Cause I'm still in love with you on this harvest moon. When we were strangers, I watched you from afar. When we were lovers, I loved you with all my heart. But now it's getting late, and the moon is climbing high. Celebrate, it's shining in your eyes. Because I'm still in love with you, wanna see you dance again, 'cause I'm still in love with you on this harvest moon. Because I'm still in love with you, I want to see you dance again. 'Cause I'm still in love with you on this harvest moon.
Wow. There's a lot of people here. I want to first start on behalf of my family, thanking a couple people. Chris Vernon, thank you so much for your kindness and generosity of providing us this facility today to house so many people. Harry and Jen Larkin, Mike Burke, Bob Aftanis, Damian Del Duca, Kurt Dow, Jim Rabin, Jimmy Leonetti, Emmett Sibley, Joe Mayo, and Ed Freeman for never losing faith in Stu. Deb Whitcraft and Jim Vogel, who are always just a minute away. Eric and Reed Johnson, who built a full ramp for Stu to get out to the outside shower in under 3 hours of the time of need. Dr. Paul Gilman. And finally, and most heartfelt, thank you to Donna Marinucci and Kimberly Craig, who love Stu so very much. Literally got Stu in the pen with the wonderful Dr. Schuckner within 2 hours, and for their care and compassion, which, as we all know, added about 5 to 6 months to Stu's life that'll never be lost. So thank you all for that. Now for the tough part. Good morning, everyone, and thank you for coming. I want to I'm going to start by saying Stu really obviously touched the souls of so many of us, and he truly was one in a million. I always told him that he was the only person that I had never heard a bad thing about, and that was even more impressive considering he was a lawyer. Everyone loves Stu, and as the obituary said, he never met a stranger and always gave you the benefit of the doubt. Yesterday, I received a message from a retired Beach Haven police officer, and he said, and I quote, "Stu always saw the good in everyone. Whoever he defended was always a good kid that just had a bad moment." And I think somebody had mentioned that before, but it's very important. Stu was a great man who obviously had some flaws, just like we all do. The difference was that he didn't care. He never once, as long as I can remember, had ever been embarrassed. No matter what happened, he was never embarrassed. This unique trait was not passed on to his 5 children. He embarrassed us often. Whether it was his pants falling down, always being late, and calling a couple people the wrong names, which happened often. Matter of fact, one day I was at work in the operating room, and Linda Lokes was there as Af asked me to tell this story. And she was my manager at the time, and she was running late, and she calls me and says, "You know, I'm running late. I just got pulled over by an officer on the turnpike." And I said, "Well, no problem." I said, "Well, just when you come in, make sure you bring the ticket so I can give it to my father." And I texted him in the operating room, and he said, "Yeah, just give it to me. I'll take care of it." So a couple months, know which one's your father when I get to court. And I said, "Well, Linda," and you look at these attorneys and you see one and you say, "I hope to God that's not my attorney." That's it. Sure enough, she called me that day and said he went and talked to the prosecutor, and she had to pay a $20 court fee and walked out. Another way he always embarrassed us, which has been mentioned by Af and Uncle Rob, was, and especially my mom embarrassed her the most, was his long list of terribly awful cars. One of my favorite stories was I was working at the Frosted Mug at 15 or 16 years old. And I remember the manager coming up to me. Stuart pulled in, and one of us, I don't even remember which one it was. And she said, "Hey, you see this guy pulling in the parking lot?" And I said, "Yeah." And she said, "He's one of the richest guys on the island. He drives these piece of crap cars so nobody knows he's rich." So I said, "Oh yeah." And he came to the window, and he said, "Hey, "Hey, Maura." And she said, "Hey, Stuart, what can I get you?" Or he said, hey, Maura. And he goes, "Hey," or she says hi to him. He says hi to Maura, and he says, "Hey, Luke." And I go, "Hey, Dad." And I have never seen a facial expression drops. It was one of the funniest things I had ever witnessed. She was mortified. But that's why we loved him, and we all have. I'll never forget when Harry Gilbert, his dentist, did some dental work on his father, and we all know how Stu had some issues. He said, "Whatever you do, just don't tell anybody that I'm your dentist." And Harry and I spoke about that the other day while we were out for a drink. Despite his flaws, that's what made Stu Stu, and made his sisters and I were all so proud to call him Dad. And it can always make you laugh, whether it was because he said something that was actually clever or funny, or because you were just simply laughing at him laughing because his laugh was so damn hilarious and contagious. Stu took me to preseason one year for soccer at college, and at the let's just say I wasn't real thrilled to leave OBI in the summer. And we get there and we're walking around campus, and he says, we're walking by the outdoor volleyball court, and he looks at me and he goes, "Well, son, this is the closest you're going to see to the beach for a long time." And I tried to keep a straight face, and then I couldn't help but laugh. But those are the things that he did. Another time I bought my son Liam his first surfboard, and I was complaining to my father about how expensive it was, and I couldn't believe how much I spent on this. Stu looks at me and he said, in all seriousness, and I quote, "Well, Luke, think of it on the bright side. You just saved yourself about $500,000. I said, "All right, well, how exactly did I do that?" He said, "Because now he's never going to want to go to college." There's a million of these stories that I could share with you all and go on and on all day. But the bottom line is Stu is the best man that I've ever met. Few people can say that their stepmother or stepfather is the best thing that ever happened to them. Well, I'm fortunate to be able to say that he is by far the best thing that ever happened to me. I'm so proud to call him my father. And Stu, I love you. And I miss you. Till we meet again.
Just 5 weeks ago, I walked with Stuart from his home on Berkeley to the beach. It was a short walk, but we talked about life. We had known each other for over 55 years. We talked about our time together at Penn State, our excursion cross country in my little, try to imagine Stuart and I in a little two-seater. Our skiing together, our horseback riding together, him getting into law school, his law practice, and the friends he made, too many to count along the way. But most of all, his family and how much they all meant to him. It was only a 1-block walk, but it was a slow, and and quite a journey that took us to that beach. Stuart was an avid reader, and often his books carried great weight for him in his life. In college, he was reading Katsantzakis, Zorba the Greek, and that led for him. He went and lived and worked on Crete for over a month. And then he read Leon Uris, Exodus, and that took him to work on kibbutz in Israel. But most importantly, and I have a great picture of this, when we went cross country, he was reading The Godfather. And you have to understand that from that book, from that novel, he recognized how important family and friendship meant to him. So many of his Beta Sig fraternity family felt that commitment firsthand. And you, his friends, hundreds of you, if not thousands of you that were here today, you felt it too. Stuart was a deep thinker. Inside this giant of a man, his innermost, truest, best self was his soul. It was that soul that made the connections to all of us. On the phone, in person, he embraced the thou inside of all of us. He made an effort, easy for him, to touch the all that we had, always going out of his way to do for you. How many times did he ask you with sincerity? And it's amazing, this Uncle Rob, he said it a couple of different ways. How are your kids? Where are they now? Does she like her job? How's he doing in school? How's your mom? And are they doing okay financially? And you personally, you can add all of those things that he said to you over the years with sincerity. They weren't just arbitrary questions. Stuart put his best self, his soul, into all his time with you. He made us feel listened to. And in turn, he made us all care about him the way we do, the reason we're here today. Oh, sure, we certainly laughed at him, and the stories we heard today just reminded us of how much we laughed at him and with him. And that bellowing laugh, that was infectious, just an extension of that wonderful soul. That baritone laugh, that baritone blast that we so enjoyed is silenced today. But it's up to us to keep his memory alive. Last night, we gathered with the family to formally create the memories that made Stuart who he was. A devoted son to his parents, Billy and Richard, big brother to Beverly and Robbie. Family was the priority. His kids were so special to him. For Jenna, Jessica, Luke, Catherine, and Chloe, he was your rock. And all of you grandchildren, Joseph and Michael and Matthew, Riley, Jordan, Liam, and Kahli, Pop spoke of you as his jewels, his prized possessions. I, of course, was envious that he had 7 with one on the way, where I only had 1. You guys were the reason he smiled. You're the twinkle in his eye and the reason for that big baritone laugh. And Kitty, you were the joy in his life. Thanks for giving him that freedom so we could share his soul with all of us. You understood him so well, and thank you for guiding him these past difficult months. He was so lucky to have you on his life's journey. That soul, that beautiful, funny soul, it was truly unique. Ever be another soul like Stuart, like Pell. We were so fortunate to have him touch our lives. Over the next few days and weeks and years, tell a story about Stuart in your life. Serious or filled with smiles, hear his laugh and feel comforted that Stuart Snyder was part of your life. And may he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. So I have one song I want to do. Stuart joined our congregation virtually for the last 2 years. And he may have been teasing me, but he said it was the best service he ever went to. Ike, I loved your services. I don't know if he watched everything virtually, but it worked okay. And this is one of the songs that I was able to do for services. It's a song kind of interesting because Stuart taught 5th grade in Sunday school. Waking him up on a Sunday morning in the fraternity was not so easy, but he was there. And he taught about Abraham, and that was one of the lessons he did. I remember working with him on this. And he talked about the moment that Abraham is told that he has to leave his birthplace to go to a place that he doesn't know where it's going to be like. The words are, Lechilah, go forth, Stuart. Lechilah, the land that I will show you. Lechilah, a place you do not know. You shall be a blessing, Lechilah. Lechilah, the land that I will show you. Lechilah, to a place you do not know. Lechilah, on your journey, I will bless you. You shall be a blessing. Stuart will be that blessing. You shall be that blessing. Lechilah. There's a final prayer that we're going to do now. I'm going to ask you in just a second to rise. At the completion of the prayer, the family will exit and we'll listen to some music as they leave, and you can go after them. Please rise. Mali rachamim, shochin b'maromim, hamitzei menucha nechona, tachat kanfei hashchina, b'malo kedoshim utorim, kezohar haraki hamazirim, et nishmat Shlomo ben Reuven v'Devora shalchach leolamo began Eden tehei menuchato ana bal harachamim hastirehu b'seter kenafecha leolamim utzror b'tzror hachayim et nishmato Adonai hu nachalato v'yanuach B'shalom al mishkavo. O God, exalted and full of compassion, grant perfect peace in your sheltering presence among the holy and pure to the soul of Stuart Snyder, who has gone to his eternal home. Master of mercy, we beseech you, remember all the worthy and righteous deeds that he performed in the land of the living. And may his soul be bound up in the bond of life. May God be his portion, and may he rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Family, you can